Over the past few days, U.S.-China trade tensions have escalated rapidly after U.S. President Donald Trump threatened to impose a 100% tariff on imports from China and announced additional export controls on critical software. Beijing immediately responded, asserting it would not back down in the face of tariff threats, while defending its tightening of rare earth export controls as a security measure rather than retaliation. These successive moves have dispelled the fragile de-escalation mood that had been hoped for ahead of high-level contacts aimed at stabilizing relations. On the U.S. side, the opening salvo was a statement on October 10th, threatening to raise tariffs to 100% on most Chinese goods, potentially taking effect from November 1st or earlier. This message was tied to accusations that Beijing was using rare earth export policy as a geopolitical lever. In parallel, the White House also mentioned the possibility of additional technology export controls, partly targeting the semiconductor supply chain and sensitive software. The hardline stance sparked market concerns about a new cycle of tit-for-tat measures, with the average tariff on Chinese goods at risk of jumping from the current approximately 55% to 100%, threatening import costs and year-end inflation. China responded with a resolute message couched in legal terms. Beijing asserted that its rare earth export controls are, quote, lawful and transparent, serving security objectives rather than coercion. The Chinese government also left the door open to dialogue, stressing that valid export licenses would continue to be granted to suitable partners, an approach some analysts view as preserving room for conditional de-escalation should Washington step back from the 100% threshold. Even so, Beijing warned of commensurate countermeasures if the U.S. implements the new tariff blow. A notable spearpoint of China's response is the tightening of its rare earth export licensing regime. The group of 17 elements that are inputs for EVs, wind turbines, radar, and countless high-tech components. On October 10th, a series of new technical administrative rules on rare earths were issued/clarified, from expanded material coverage to licensing guidance, spelling out how to tighten the valve while avoiding being seen as an outright embargo. Shortly thereafter, September 2025 data showed China's rare earth exports fell sharply for the third consecutive month, reflecting the impact of the new controls. This has raised concerns across global technology and defense industries about supply chain disruptions if the standoff persists. Beyond the rare earth front, port fees have become a secondary but equally sensitive flashpoint. On October 10th, China announced a special fee on ships owned by or affiliated with the U.S. when calling at Chinese ports, stating this was a, quote, reciprocal measure in response to Washington's plan to levy high charges on China-linked vessels entering U.S. ports. The fee structures on both sides, calculated by tonnage and capped by the number of calls per year, are clearly tit-for-tat and could push up trans-Pacific logistics costs, especially on routes serving the year-end shopping season. In the policy landscape, one technical but important detail for businesses deserves attention. The Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, USTR, has extended certain Section 301 tariff exclusions on Chinese goods until November 29, 2025, instead of expiring on August 31, 2025. Announced in late August and recorded in the Federal Register in early September, the decision allows some products to continue to be exempt from the prevailing 25% tariff. With the risk of a 100% tariff hanging overhead, the still valid exclusion list becomes an even more crucial lifeline for importers in the coming months. Why is 100% such a sensitive threshold? If implemented broadly, that tariff level would simultaneously hit three arteries: U.S. consumers, who would face sharply higher prices on consumer goods, electronics, appliances, toys, and more. 2. U.S. manufacturers, many of whom rely on components and materials from China and could see input costs surge. And 2. The global supply chain, as firms are forced to reroute orders, shift volumes to third countries, or delay investments due to policy uncertainty. The year-end inflation picture in the U.S. could thus become more complicated, just as the Federal Reserve seeks to keep price pressures on a cooling trajectory. From China's perspective, a 100% tariff could erode exports to the world's largest market, prompting Beijing to accelerate market diversification and move up the value chain. These assessments are consistent with warnings from many organizations and media outlets about the spillover effects of the new round of confrontation. Rare earths are Beijing's key pressure point because China currently dominates mining and refining at a global scale. Any changes to export licensing could roil sectors from electric vehicles to defense. Reuters' explanatory analysis on October 10th indicates the new controls are not a blanket ban, but a strict licensing regime, enough to create friction and legal risk for dependent partners, thereby increasing bargaining leverage. Meanwhile, the drop in September export data shows that the tightening valve effect has already emerged in practice, prompting Washington to ramp up tariff pressure as a balancing response. Notably, amid the interwoven hard and soft statements, both sides' policy signals still leave an exit open. China emphasizes dialogue and has not rushed to unveil a new retaliatory tariff package. On the U.S. side, after the threats, there have been some limited signs of de-escalation, albeit within a very narrow range. That space is an opportunity for technical negotiations around the Section 301 exclusion list, the timeline and scope of any 100% tariff, a transparent mechanism for rare earth licensing, and a code of conduct for ships and ports to avoid an escalating fee war. If these channels function effectively, the risk of supply chain breakage can be contained, though it will be difficult to return to the previous normal. More broadly, the current tit-for-tat cycle shows that both economies are combining tariffs, export controls, and port administrative measures to maximize leverage. For the U.S., the 100% threat serves both as a deterrent signal and as a bargaining chip ahead of high-level meetings. For China, rare earths are the strategic pressure point that allows Beijing to keep the negotiating rhythm without immediately firing back with tariffs. The window for talks remains open, but policy risk for businesses is real until there are formal documents on the scope and timing of the next tariff/exclusion decisions. In a period of uncertainty, practical solutions include diversifying sources, locking in prices where appropriate, and maintaining regular legal compliance and customs dialogues to minimize disruptions.